Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Bites podcast. My name is Dan Hafner. Welcome into 2024. This is the first episode of 2024. Before we get into today's content, if you're watching this on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're watching the show, really appreciate any thumbs up, any likes, any shares, any comments. That really helps the show grow. Any ratings and reviews also helps if you're listening to this anywhere you're listening on your podcast app. So with that being said, super excited to welcome in my very first guest of the year, Sara Avalos. We're going to talk a little bit about her platform, MD Solve Systems, her background in this. It's really interesting, and I kind of have a soft spot for people like Sara, being kind of, at least the history in the tech field, in the medical field. For those of you who don't know, my wife's in that field as well too. So I kind of have it was very interesting when I saw Sara, to reach out to her to be on the show. So anyways, without any further ado, welcome to the show, Sara. How you doing?
Thank you for having me, Dan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited. So tell us a little bit about your background. How I kind of alluded that you were in the medical field, but then kind of now inside of the tech space. So tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, I'm a nurse, a registered nurse, master's prepared. My first degree is in nursing education, and the second one is in nursing informatics. And so that started back in 2011. Uh, Throughout time and moved in multiple spaces. I was also a combat medic. I served in the military for 7 years during 9/11, and all of that was quite the event in history. Then as a military spouse after I left. And so my husband finished 20 years in the Navy 6 years ago. So I mentioned that is that every time I moved, I had to learn a new job, learn a new space, and train my predecessor
Hmm.
or my successor, sorry. And with that, it helped me see that I am more than my roles in each healthcare space, whether I was a nurse consultant, whether I was a nurse educator, whether I was an infection preventionist, an epidemiologist. So it really changed wherever I was. And so I realized that I needed to learn more about technology. So I actually, as a veteran, you get a lot of different benefits, which includes courses in software programming. I learned front web development. I also learned SQL and all of these other, and R, which is great and definitely in the data analysis space.
Fun.
And so, yeah, so I can go on and on, but it really had to do with realizing that I was a quick learner, and then I just jumped in and wasn't afraid, right? Like people are about afraid of failure. So that's really how that came to be in this.
Wow, very, very interesting. And I will just say, well, thank you for you and your husband's service. We really appreciate all of that. And it's really interesting because I was never in the military. We never really had family but with being married to a woman in the medical field, we were moving every 3 years as well. So I've always compared it. I feel for the military people that move every 3 years, because we did that for 10 years. We've moved 4 different times for this type of stuff, following her along. So I was kind of down the same path of, got a little hard to hold down a job, got a little tough to be like, hey, I want to promote, get promoted up the line. But then they were like, you're going to be leaving soon. So I had to hide that from employers and that kind of stuff. And it eventually led to the exact same path that you led to, like, of, I got to kind of figure this out for myself and kind of do this type of stuff. So I feel you there. I really, really do. So that's very, very cool. So um, what kind of prompted this? Obviously that kind of led to this type of stuff, but what kind of prompted, like, hey, can you tell us, like, that moment when you were like, hey, I want to do this. I want to figure out tech. I want to maybe start my own business in this. Do you remember, like, what triggered that?
It had to do because if I were going to increase my impact, have a broader reach, it had to be more than the bedside one-on-one. And I had to figure out, how do I duplicate myself, right? Exponentially.
Hmm.
And so it had to do with more with, I needed to get into the updated times. Even now, a nurse informaticist, there's only one per hospital. Like there's not very many nurse informaticists.
Oh.
And so even trying to get my my training during my postgraduate degree program, it was so difficult. I had to apply to like 10 different hospitals to beg them, please let me train under a nurse informaticist. They're one nurse informaticist. So anyway,
Hmm.
it prompted needing to get with the times, understand that whoever doesn't go through the technology space will be left behind. And so I just needed to learn it, whether how difficult it was. And then you find that there are shorter cuts, right? Like I think you mentioned that there's different platforms in which to build. So at first I thought I'm going to just build everything from scratch. And then I got smarter and realized that I can combine different softwares together. So it really just, you could learn and learn the hard way and keep stumbling, or you can just work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of went down that path as well too. This is really, really neat. Um, and it was funny because I never realized what the word tech stack meant, even when I was in that. And then I started to realize, oh, it's actually just, excuse me, a combination of that kind of stuff and how it all works together, you know? Um, so, so I guess that's a good segue into MD Solve systems, right? Because it's kind of a combination of all kinds of different pieces that we've kind of, been able to figure out how to put together and such. So, so can you tell us a little bit about MD Solve systems? Who it's for, what it does, what's the purpose of it?
Yes, I actually have two spaces, two different avatars in which I utilize the platform for. Currently, I use it for healthcare providers in marketing and a lot of their operations in their outpatient centers. And
Mm,
so it'll utilize for their lead management, for advertising, a lot of the talking to new leads, getting them into the system, booking appointments for them. Then the physicians get the consultations, and then they move into the in-person spaces depending upon the procedures that are needed. So it'll have different segues, and then it connects with their ongoing database reactivations, is what they call it. It works in engaging with their previous customers, potential customers, and it just really allows them to continue that relationship with them, utilizing a lot of things that are connected all into one, right? Even AI, I connected it with OpenAI, using an API. I have used different things, just fusing it all into one system, which is, I think, absolutely fantastic. So the other
oh,
space, which I would be hoping to launch within the next couple of weeks, has to do with healthcare providers who want to teach or teach online or coach online into either like continuing education spaces, or whether or not they want to teach the general public. Um, so that's a long-winded answer, but I could go on and on about each. But really, it's utilized to get people into their ecosystem, nurture them, operations, and then ongoing follow-up.
wow, very, very cool. So it's almost, I like how you have it originally for healthcare providers, and now you're kind of expanding it to, well, it's almost like you're going kind of like a level down of like more of the individual granular type of people. So they're actually able to, you know, work with you and learn how to teach what they have done. How does that work with, like, I mean, are you competing with medical schools in that sense? Or you compete, like, how does that actually work? That's very interesting because it's like, is there, are they giving specific, you know, super specific things? Is there, like, I'm just really curious how that's all going to work.
Right. So the interest that I've gathered is a lot of healthcare providers teach anyway in their spaces. I'm not sure if you're hearing the jet. Not sure if you're getting that.
No, no.
Good. Awesome. So a lot of the feedback that I gotten, and I want to launch that in the next couple weeks, but just to so you know, or that I can explain the interest, there are healthcare providers that do not want to teach in a university space. They want to teach fellow professionals about the real things about working in the healthcare space, what they've learned, their experiences, best practices, that sort of things based on their own knowledge, right, and experience. There's another group of people that are interested in that want to teach the general public, but instead of being filtered by you see this one patient for an hour that have been filtered through their insurance, they want to be able to teach more people than just one-on-one. For example, there are physical therapists, and like one idea that I can remember is wants to teach um, in how to treat incontinence in women who have suffered cancer therapy, right? And in order to not need surgery. So there are different ways in which there's a lot of knowledge, right? And we hear about so many people teaching anything under the sun. But what about a professional teaching about their knowledge and experience in really treating people, but not in a treatment, not in a patient provider relationship, but more of a coach, more of an instructor. And so that has to be super clear.
Wow, that's really, really neat. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, like the online education space. I don't even know the latest numbers. It goes up, seems like every new study you see, it's by 2028, it's going to be a trillion million bajillion dollars or like something like that. So it's that's really interesting because there are a lot of courses out there for learning just about everything. It's almost like apps, right? It's like there's an app for that. It's almost like there's a course for that now. But that's super interesting because I can think of how this could apply for physical therapists, all kinds of different people in that professional space. That's really, really interesting because like just like you said, there's all these different like niches or verticals that can then be applied to that. So your platform helps them bring that to fruition, correct?
Right, and having a package, so that's why it's going to take me a couple more weeks in that it's made so that the software really it's a plug and play system for them so that they won't
Mm.
have to build anything. They will just have to plug in their content, put in their custom values, and it will just plug all the way through so that way they won't have to worry about a lot of the support because I'll have 24/7 support and weekly training, Q&As, and all of those types of things that and where a lot of software platforms I think fall short is that they don't provide that level of support for the end user. And so then people drop off, right? People are disillusioned or, oh, it's not going to work as well as I thought. So really it's intended to support all the way through.
Very cool. Very cool. I like it. So how are you differentiating? Is there, I don't even know, I can't even think of a competitor off the top of my head. How are you differentiating yourself? This is more of a marketing and
Sure,
messaging
sure.
type of question, but I'm interested, like, is that your differentiator of the plug and play system, the ongoing support, that kind of stuff? Or is it that it's, more of the professional education type of thing, or maybe it's both.
So it is from a master's prepared nurse who happens to specialize in education, a person that has transitioned from the medical space, the traditional medical space into this space, be able to be the guide, if you will, the plug and play, yes, to have it all ready to go for them. So I need to do a few more tests in order to make sure everything works just right. And then the ongoing support 24/7, and then installation, either for you or with you. So I think that's the space. And I don't, as far as you asked about competitors, a lot of the competitors are very general in what they offer. It's like anybody can teach. And so uh, the professional that I'm seeking has to do, really feels like it doesn't meet my needs or it's not made for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so let's talk about software then. How is this your first venture into the software of like having an actual tech company?
The first successful one, yes.
Ah, good differentiation. Good one. Yeah. I think we've all been there who are in the software game, and maybe a lot of you listening as well. I remember my very first one turned out to be it was like a successful failure because it got traction, but I lost a lot of money. So that's interesting. Thank you for answering that way. That's really cool. So what about this venture has made it successful as compared to your failures in the past? Like, could you point to, it might be different, they might be like, different things, but what could you point to about this venture that has been more that has led to it being successful as opposed to your failures in the past?
Well, I'm not in it alone. So that's one of them. You have
Mhm.
the ongoing support. There is continuous updates. So it really feels like it's backed by a very reputable, company source. And then it also any requests for updates or like needing a team becomes less and less necessary. It's we can have a less, like, I don't need 50 people to be part of this venture. I can reduce the size, and then the ongoing support around the software is also why it's winning in that sense, because it's you see the results, day in and day out. I think that is just the future, really, like like Airbnb, or like you don't need to create the house in order to have the business of utilizing the space of the house. You don't, or like Uber, you didn't need to invent a car. You just needed to utilize the car for the purpose of the service.
Yeah, it's like taking advantage of pre-built things and plugging it into that. So that's interesting. I mean, that's innovative in a sense because, um, you know, you, I mean, really, like, a lot of these professionals that you're going to be working with could go out and want to build their own thing of say, hey, I want to build this. And, but then, like, just like you found, there's, okay, well, where do I start? How do I bring this to people? How do I, there's a lot that's usually the first roadblock that people run into when it comes to software and tech, right? It's like, oh, I have this great, awesome idea. And then you come to the how and you're like, not really sure, right? So that's that. It sounds like you're kind of down the right path with, okay, look, I got the thing for you. Just, you got the car, you got the house already. Like, here it is. Just come on in and give us some information, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it also has to do with, oh gosh, what sort of funnels do I use? What websites do I use? How do I, just like you said, how do I plug all these pieces together? I'm also going to be seeking to be a CE provider. So that means that I can teach people how to be a continuing education provider for where their
Mm,
particular discipline, could, seek out those professionals and have that credential behind them in order to be a reputable provider. So it could be that you could reach out to the general public, or you could reach out to like-minded peer professionals. So it could be either way, and they don't have to. They could teach whatever they want. It's different if you're in a university space. You are given one fee for this many units, and you are supposed to teach this one thing. And by the way, you must do research, and all of the other things that they take their time, right? So it actually, for me, working in a community college or even in a university setting, I would get paid less than my previous job that I left, which is, a six-figure job that I left. And why would I go and teach in a university where I would get paid less than that? And take up more of my time. And that's something that, why we don't have more educators that are professional healthcare providers. It's because they don't pay very well.
mm, yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, there is, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this trend, as far as last year, especially with like the advent of AI well, not the advent, but like the explosion in the saliency of AI and how like it's just everywhere, it seems like. um, because I think that there's a big feeling now of like, okay, now's the time. There's so many people that, it's like quiet quitting, they call it, especially in the younger generation of like, hey, I feel like I did that before. You might have done that at some, I don't know, but I feel like I did that before that was a thing. I was like at my job, like working on a business kind of still. But it's like there's such a big promise out there in the software and the tech world. So do you think that that's driving more interest in this, and do you think that that's flooding the market with types of things, or do you think like it really is kind of like an abundance thing of like everyone can succeed in this space if you actually take these right decisions and use things like you said, like a reputable back company and things that are actually backed by teams? Does it make it so it's more doable for people?
Yes and no. because you have to change the person that you are to be able to fill the roles of, can a founder be the marketer, be the salesperson, can be the planner and executor. So I think that yes, it makes it the dream more available to people, but the execution is where they fall short, because there's an abundance of ideas, but some people start something and do something for a month and give up, right? So it's the mindset. Can you continue move forward in even if you don't see results right away? Do you have that grit in order to keep moving forward? Are you going, so I think it has a lot of to do with there, if you're used to being an employee where you know you're going to get paid, every 2 weeks, every month, and when that doesn't happen, you don't have the coping skills in order to move forward, or plan ahead, or remove things that you don't need in your life, right? Stop the bad habits. You're going to run into problems. And so I think it has to do, there's a ton of ideas out there, but not a lot of the right execution of those ideas.
Yeah, I remember one of he's not a personal mentor of mine, but a a virtual mentor of people I've followed and stuff. And he always says there's there's no such thing as $1 million idea, only $1 million executions. So that was really good. That made me think of that one right there. Okay, so speaking of that, what types of things are you doing to grow MD Solve systems? Are you active on social media? Are you doing, obviously you're doing podcasts like this to help promote it and things like that? What I'm just curious, what's your secret sauce for growing the platform?
So I did get into a coaching program, to be quite honest, to see like, is there something I hadn't thought of? But yes, social media, yes, in a lot of like Facebook groups, Instagram as well. I'm digging into, and it really adds in some spaces to target my ideal avatar. Learning is another thing, because again, I didn't come from the marketing space. I came from the healthcare space where people just come to me. I didn't have to seek them out, right? So I had to change. I'm reading. I have a library of books that I've been reading this past year about how am I not seeing what's right in front of me. So yes, it's through all of those things, and gaining that interest in that email list, and really just kind of updating them. This is where we are. We're launching in a couple weeks. And then I've gotten to I'm part of the Aurora Chamber of Commerce. I also a part of a leadership team with them, doing a lot of construction work for like a crisis center and the Aurora Mental Health Center and the
Hmm.
Village Institute. So I'm doing a lot of the outreach, both in person and online. And so, of course, I could do a lot better with it. And so I'm going to be hiring a team to help me as well, because I noticed that I'm the bottleneck in a lot of things where I could be outsourcing things that I should be. And I'm sure you probably realize this, and probably come up with processes on your own, where if I don't have a process and I'm the bottleneck, well, then I'm the one that's not allowing me to grow.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's always a level of that. As far as I mean, I by no means claim to be, the end all be all of how entrepreneurship works and everything. But I have noticed that as I've grown over the past 4 or 5 years, yeah, I think there was a point where I was the bottleneck at a very low level, and now as I've grown, I'm still the bottleneck in ways. So I think there's always like an element's always there, but again, it's such a muscle that you have to flex. It's such a, or not flex, but like work. It's like working out, right? It's almost like it's a repeatable skill you have to learn, you know. Anyway, well, just a quick side note from something you mentioned you read a lot of books. I always like to ask, like, is there, not your own or anything, but is there a book recommendation that you had from last year that really, anything that would be really good for us to check out at all?
Yes, Alex Hermosi's $100 million leads.
That's
And
so funny. I
I
just
bought
listened to
like,
that.
yeah, $100 million leads and the $100 million offers. Those are
Mm.
like the major ones. And I, of course, bought the books. Um,
Yeah, that's so funny. I just listened to that the other day.
Yeah, no, it's Alex Hormozy is really a person that thought, "Oh my gosh, he's really dumbing it down for me." You know, he wrote the books in intentionally to make them simple so that the 8th grade, I can't remember if he said it was written in the 5th grade or 8th grade level. And really when people are trying to make things super complicated, it means that they don't really understand the concepts. But it he was intentional in writing it like 14 times this last book, and it took him 2 years because he
Mhm.
rewrote it. How can I make this evergreen and not just for 1 year? How can it last beyond my lifetime? Because the principles stay the same. And then the concepts are written in a way that even I can understand them. So
That's very cool. Yeah, I remember one of the very first people I ever met. He talked about in this space anyway. Said exactly the same thing. If you can't explain it to a sixth grader, then you don't really understand it. You know.
yes, yes.
Um, very very cool. Um, so so you've kind of talked a little bit about like what's next, what's coming, and stuff. So I'm curious. You know, what what is one of the things? I don't want to talk all sunshine and rainbows. Like what's maybe something that for somebody still listening, like what's something that's unglamorous about like what you do that you just again you just maybe you don't want to delegate, but you just like something that you if you it was maybe it's a roadblock, maybe it was something you came upon, something unglamorous, something not maybe a big failure, whatever, that you currently deal with or you have dealt with that could be a potential way to help someone else sidestep that in the future if they go down this path of starting up a tech company, starting up software, anything like that. Do you have anything you can share that way?
Yeah, so I think it's your own mind and your own bad habits start creeping up because there's nobody like usually like if you work at a regular job, you have a boss. That
Mm.
boss is and you already know what you're gonna need to do that week, that month, what your goals are, how you know if you met those goals. And now you have to essentially be your own boss. And that concept didn't sink in until after the fact. And I thought, oh, wow, nobody's going to keep me accountable but me. And so it really is, how am I going to ensure that I'm keeping myself accountable? What actions am I doing that are actually moving the needle instead of wasting time on a logo or on a website that doesn't look exactly perfect and I need a few more days to work on it? What have I done today to increase to increase awareness, to increase my email list, have I done any of those activities? If not, then I need to focus on that. And then planning out your day in a way that you are not getting lost in the minutia because nobody's policing you. Nobody is really over your shoulder like, "Hey, I need this by this time." No, can you go back and fix this, re-edit this? It's really just you. So all of those bad habits come back to bite you. And so that's what my advice is, that knowing that in mind is that a little bit each day improving on the previous day as far as your the time management, the prioritization, and the documentation.
Makes a lot of sense. So tactically, do you use like something like to do apps or lists or anything like that? Like is there a way that you actually track, okay, here's like the important things that I need to do every day, and those are kind of on repeat, or I'm just like specific, like I'm talking like in the weeds here, like
I,
specifically, is there anything specific that
I've
you do for that?
So I've used, well, of course, I started with Google Sheets and then I moved to Trello. And then NDSolve also has a task management, space in which you can track your tasks.
Look at that. So you built your own. Nice. Like, see, that's the beautiful part about software and things like that is when you don't find quite the right solution that's out there, you can make your own. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, well, I think we're about ready to wrap up. This was really, really helpful. So do you have anything else to add before we kind of wrap this episode up at all?
I didn't want to leave people with feeling like it's impossible in order to do your own thing. I just want to make sure that people realize that they can, and that there's personal growth that happens before you take the leap. And I feel like just for people to have that reminder that you can do this and you don't have to go in it alone, that it's so, because it will be, right? You won't see your coworkers every day, but you create those spaces in which to engage with folks. And I just want to make sure that people know that it's possible, and that you don't have to do it alone, and that things are greener on the other side with effort and grit.
Amen. Couldn't have said it better. I really appreciate it. And I echo all of that. If um you really can do this. That's what I always like to drive home at the end of these episodes. So thank you for that. That was awesome. So you guys, if you are in the medical space, if you are a medical professional, if anything that Sara, has talked about or kind of mentioned with MD Solve Systems, you can check out her platform. It's MD, that's M as in Mary, D as in dog, solve.com. It's mdsolve.com. Looks like you have some free resources on there and some different things that they can get started with. Is there on the platform as well?
Yes, there's the ebook Healers to Teachers as well. And I'm, of course, working on other freebies as well that just put in your email address and I will send it right to you.
Awesome. Very, very cool. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up. Somebody just rang the doorbell. The dogs are going crazy. So it's about time to wrap up. So I really, really appreciate it, Sara. Thank you very much. Everyone, check out mdsolve.com. Sounds like a really, really cool platform. I've checked it out myself. It's actually very, very neat. So thank you so much, Sara. Really appreciate your time. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. One more reminder, please be sure to subscribe to the show, like it wherever you listen, and tune in. Thank you very much to Sara, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Have a good one.